The day I finally pulled the plug wasn't marked by thunder or lightning. It was the quiet click of a phone line and the sharp sting of betrayal. For 3 agonizing years, I, Renate Richter, had been the ghost financier of my son Max's comfortable life with his wife, Lena. I was the silent partner, the bottomless well, the $33,300 secret in their marriage. But all it took was one phrase, one venom-laced whisper, to wake the lioness in the aging mother. I was holding the phone, my heart brimming with foolish hope, ready to finalize the wedding details. Lena's face filled the screen, framed by a smug, cold triumph. "Oh, we already did it yesterday," she purred, her eyes fixed on mine. "Just a small ceremony. We only invited special people." The words didn't just hurt, they incinerated. They left a smoking crater where my dignity used to be. Special people. I nearly dropped the phone, the cheap plastic suddenly feeling like a block of lead. I was the woman who had diverted my late husband's hard-earned savings, my ticket to a peaceful retirement to cover their $500 rent year after year. I had furnished their nest, stocked their fridge, and been their perpetual safety net, and I was deemed unspecial. I stood frozen in my own living room, the pale pink gown I'd bought for the wedding hanging like an accusation in my mind's closet. I looked at Max, my boy, the child I'd raised alone after Robert died. He was physically unable to meet my gaze, his shame a flimsy shield. Meanwhile, Lena stretched out on my sofa, a queen surveying her purchased territory. When Max finally spoke, his voice was thin, reeking of practiced lies. "Mum, it was just intimate, witnesses only." But the internet never lies. That evening, I saw the photos, Lena's parents beaming with pride, her siblings clinking crystal flutes, and Lena, radiant in a white dress, a dress I had unknowingly funded just weeks prior. The realization didn't bring tears. It brought a searing, cold rage. The next morning, the fog of decades lifted. I sat at my dining table, not to plan another surprise for them, but to perform a cold, hard autopsy of my finances. I needed to see the magnitude of my own foolishness in black and white. $33,300. That was the stark, numerical proof of my devotion, a sum thrown away to keep 2 ungrateful adults comfortable. I drove straight to the bank. Mr. Klein, the manager, who had silently watched my accounts bleed, looked concerned. "Mrs. Richter, are you sure about canceling all the automatic transfers?" "What happened, Mr. Klein?" I said, meeting his eye, "is that I finally chose myself." He processed the termination orders. As I walked out, my phone buzzed frantically. Max, Lena, desperate, toxic attempts to reestablish the cash flow. I smiled, feeling lighter than air, and turned the device off. My money was mine. My conscience was clean. The climax arrived that afternoon. 3 cars outside my home, the sickening sight of Max, Lena, and a predatory lawyer, Dr. Fisher, rifling through my private papers on my cable. "We're not, thank God," Lena cried, rushing me with fake concern. "We've consulted Dr. Fisher about your strange mental decline." My blood ran cold, but my voice remained steady. "My mental decline? I've never been clearer, and you are trespassing." Fisher, slick and condescending, smoothly introduced the threat. "Mrs. Richter, your children are worried. Your erratic behavior, the financial cutoff, the isolation suggest you may require temporary financial guardianship." Guardianship, They weren't seeking help, they were seeking a legal way to seize my money and declare me a burden. The word confusion from Lena's mouth was the final unforgivable insult. "I am not confused," I stated, retrieving my documents from the table. "I am decisive, and you will all leave my house immediately." Max, his face contorted in a toddler's rage, played his final card. "Mom, you can't just cut us off. We have obligations. Obligations based on my money, not on my well-being, not on my company. You were welcome to my life with love. You are leaving it with a lawyer. Get out." As they retreated, defeated but venomous, Max hurled his ultimate curse. "Mom, this will end badly. You'll die alone with no one to care for you." "Max," I whispered, the sadness overwhelming the anger. "I was alone already. The difference now is that I chose my solitude over your neglect." The closing of the door behind them was the sweetest sound of silence I had ever heard. The war began instantly. Mr. Weber, my attorney, confirmed their actions were a textbook case of elder financial abuse. I installed high-end cameras and new locks, protecting myself from my own blood. When the social worker, Ms. Schmidt, arrived, sent by Max and Lena to assess my paranoia, I stood firm. I presented Ms. Schmidt with my flawlessly managed bank statements and the documented history of $33,300 in payments. I introduced her to Eleanor, my new neighbor and witness. "Ms. Schmidt," I said, "my son is 35. My responsibility was to raise him to 18. Financing his adult whims is not my obligation. It is a choice, and I have chosen not to." The social worker closed her file, clearly seeing through the malicious facade. "Mrs. Richter, I see no indication of risk. I am closing this case." But the desperate duo escalated again, filing a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence. The courtroom triumph. The trial date arrived. I walked into the courthouse, not as a victim, but as a general leading her defense. Max and Lena's lawyer tried to paint me as erratic. Lena gave an Academy Award-worthy performance, tearfully describing my mental decline. But Mr. Weber dismantled them piece by piece. He forced Max to admit he broke into my house and to confess that he couldn't recall a single non-monetary visit. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Moore testified to my excellent cognitive function, my friends testified to my newfound vitality, and I presented the final damning figure, $33,300. When Judge Miller returned, his words were crystalline. "The evidence clearly shows Mrs. Renate Richter is in full possession of her faculties. Her financial decisions are rational. The court finds this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest and not by genuine concern." The gavel slammed. I had won. Leaving the courtroom, I saw the raw, exposed hatred in Lena's eyes and the fleeting glimpse of regret in Max's. It was too late. I was free. That night, my new friends, Eleanor, Alfreda, and the others, toasted me. "Renate," Alfreda declared, raising her glass, "you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life." She was right. I sold the house, donated a significant portion of the money to abuse charities, and used the rest to live the life I had postponed. I'd traveled to Europe, painted, and finally embraced the future Robert had intended for me. I never heard from Max or Lena again. And I finally understood the fundamental truth. True love never comes with a price tag, and the greatest act of love is protecting your own worth. I am Renate, 72 years old, and my life is finally and wonderfully my own.